Hey gang, I just finished the video for tomorrow, the Random Thursday video, and it is mediocre, let me tell you. They're not all going to be astonishing works of art, so it'll be fun, whatever. I wanted to show you something really quick in order to get into a story of something that I just discovered that I thought was fascinating. I've been kind of weirdly obsessed with it lately, but let me grab... Should have gotten this out before I started recording. Here. My sister got me this for, I want to say Christmas. Maybe it was a birthday thing a while back. But it's called The Anthology of American Folk Music, edited by Harry Smith. Now, excuse me. This is a collection of 6 CDs. Remember CDs? That are basically like roots music. It's going back to like what started it all, you know, from the old blues to you know, Appalachian folk kind of thing. And I don't know if you're into that kind of music. I never really thought I would be, but I just thought it would be an interesting little, I thought it would be an interesting thing to have. Like almost a conversation starter or something like that. And then I started listening to it, and it's really fascinating. It's really fascinating to look back at where our music came from. The music that we listen to every day, there's a lot of banjos in this, that it's just fascinating. And I've listened to it many times, and of course now I barely even have a CD player to play it on anymore, but this is like from the Smithsonian Institution. So this is like, I want to say it was included in the National Archives or something as like a founding document of sorts for popular music today. One of my favorite things that I have. It's really an interesting little piece. But I say that to bring up something that I just discovered recently. It's along that same path. So there was a musician in the 50s. Her name was Connie Converse. And by all accounts, she was kind of a genius, kind of a prodigy, not just with music, but in other parts of her life as well. She was very intellectual and whatnot. But I think she grew up in New Hampshire or Connecticut, somewhere up in the Northeast. And at one point in the early 50s, she moved to New York and started hanging out in the Village. This was the beatnik time. This is when Jack Kerouac kind of made his break. And this is when folk music was first kind of getting started. And these were, again, this was the melting pot, part of the melting pot that sort of created rock and roll in modern music as we know it. And she started playing around in clubs and whatnot there in Greenwich Village. At one point, she got on a show called, I think it's called Your Morning or This Morning or something like that. It was like the Today Show of the time, but it was hosted by Walter Cronkite. This is way back when. Walter Cronkite was young when she appeared on his show. And everything was live back then. They didn't make recordings of any of the, like, all TV was just like basically a stage play that was projected onto people's TV screens. So there's no recording of this, of her appearing on his show. But that was like the biggest break she ever got. Her career never quite took off, but she was hugely influential in that whole Greenwich Village folk scene and played a big, huge part in sort of growing what that became. And as I understand it, and by the way, some of you out there, if you know the story better than I do, I might be getting a few little facts wrong, but this is how I understand it, and this is what is interesting to me. She only made one recording. Not one recording. She recorded one time, literally in some dude's kitchen. There was a guy who wanted to sort of promote her and wanted to get her name out there, so he asked her to come over, whipped out the recorder and recorded there in her kitchen, and she recorded a handful of songs. I think, not a handful, maybe like a dozen songs. And that's the only recording that exists of Connie Converse. This later became released, I'm jumping ahead a little bit. I'm jumping ahead. Don't let me jump ahead. So she recorded this, it wasn't even an album, it was just a bunch of recordings with this guy in his kitchen, very lo-fi. And then after a while, she started to kind of give up. Like, things just didn't really take off for her. And she decided, I'm not really going anywhere. I'm going broke here, living in New York. So she wound up moving to Ann Arbor, Michigan, and working for the university over there. And anyway, her music career just kind of stopped, just kind of ended. But she was always unhappy. She always felt like she should have been gotten more attention than she did. And one day she packed up her car and said she needed to start over. She had sent a letter to her parents or somebody and said that she was kind of wanting to start a new life. And she loaded up her car and she drove away and was never seen again. That's kind of one of the big mysteries of Connie Converse. She literally just vanished. And this was back in, I want to say, the 70s when this happened. So, people weren't tracked as much back then as they are now. Some believe that maybe she did just start over somewhere else with a new identity and a new name. Some think she might have committed suicide because she was a fairly depressive person. And others think that, she could have fallen victim to some terrible fate, serial killer or something like that. Who knows? But she was never seen again. And there was only one recording ever made of her music. And it just kind of sat there. This guy who recorded it, he probably had it in a box somewhere in his attic or something. And then he sort of rediscovered it back in the 90s? No, it was like 2003 or 2004, something like that. And I should have the guy's name in front of me, but I don't. I apologize. But he appeared on NPR, I want to say one of the shows there, All Things Considered maybe. He was doing an interview and he was like, hey, I found these recordings that I made of this woman, Connie Converse. And she was totally forgotten at that point. Like, she never really got that much attention back in the day, and the people who saw her, most of them were dead now. And this guy just happened to have kept these recordings literally in his attic or something. And he found them. And I guess he had connections to NPR, and he was on there talking about something else. And he was like, hey, I've got these songs that I just rediscovered, and I wanted to play some of them for you. And they were so well received that they were able to create an album. They released an album, I want to say in 2005. It's called So Sad, So Lovely by Connie Converse. And this is out there. You can find it on Spotify. You can listen to all of her stuff on Spotify. And dude, it's friggin' good. It is really friggin' good. And it made me think of this anthology that I pulled up in terms of like it's sort of folksy. It's very clever. The lyrics are very clever. Musically, it's all very complex. And it's worth checking out. This is sort of my way of saying, hey, if you've never heard of Connie Converse and you in any way like, say, Bob Dylan or early Joan Baez, that kind of thing, you really should listen to this because you can really see the influence that she had over the early folk records. And it's the mystery of what happened to her that makes it all the more tantalizing, I've always had a little bit of a fascination for similar stories like that. People who were supremely talented, were just way ahead of their time, really, but languished in obscurity and never really saw their fame until way, way later. The number one name that comes up to me right now is Nick Drake. A lot of you might know who Nick Drake is now, but for a long time, he was completely forgotten. He was a singer-songwriter from the UK that had a few albums that he released, and the first one I think was Pink Moon, and it got some good critical reception but didn't really kind of blow up. And then the first one was good enough that he was able to actually put some money into the second one, which was called Brighter Later. And this one was supposed to be his magnum opus. This was the one that was going to break him out and was really going to expose him to the mainstream. Unfortunately, it came out the same year as like the Beatles' White Album and a big, huge album from the Rolling Stones. Like, it just got swamped under these like classic albums that just happened to come out in that same time. This was in the 70s. And he overdosed on pills. And again, there's a mystery. Was it a suicide? Was it accidental? Because he was also, kind of languished in depression, and they don't know. They don't know whether it was suicidal or not. His parents and the people who knew him swore up and down there's no way that he would have committed suicide, but who knows. But again, totally forgotten for a long time until a Volkswagen ad in the late 90s, I want to say, for the Jetta. Was that the Jetta? No, it was the Cabrio. There's a caveat. Doesn't matter. But if you do a search on YouTube, and if I'm not too lazy, I'll put a link down in the description of this one for the Pink Moon commercial. This was possibly the commercial that made me consider getting into advertising. I always wanted to be a filmmaker, and then I saw this commercial, and it might be, as far as I'm concerned, the best commercial ever made. It's so gorgeous and so beautiful. It's basically just these kids driving around the countryside in their car, and it's nighttime, and it's beautiful, and they're just kind of like enjoying the sight, and there's little like tidbits of whether there's some relationship stuff going on with them. It's just kind of like just enough to give you an idea that there's something under the surface of these 4 kids driving around. And then they show up at a party, and they sit there and they look at the party, and there's people walking around, woo, all drunk and stuff, and they just kind of look at each other, and they throw the car in reverse and keep driving. And it's all set to this gorgeous song, Pink Moon by Nick Drake. It's so evocative, and it's so atmospheric and beautiful that I saw that and I was like, okay, if you can do that with a commercial, I want to do that. You know, like that made advertising worth it to me. Like, you can make art with advertising. And since then there have been many other commercials that I think fit that same category. But that sort of reintroduced the world to Nick Drake, and he kind of started blowing up, and you started seeing him in movie soundtracks and whatnot. And so he found this fame and this acceptance that he never had in real life, and many consider him very much ahead of his time in terms of like his musicality and everything like that. Another story, just real quick, that's similar to the Connie Converse thing, and that I have a personal sort of connection to, is a guy named Robert Johnson. Now, this is way back in the day. This is 1920s. He was a blues singer that traveled all over the South and Mississippi, sort of the Mississippi Delta. That's where all the blues came from. And he recorded in Dallas, where I live, in this recording studio that has now become like a museum. Like they were going to tear this building down because obviously it's a very old building downtown, and they actually saved the building, turned it into a little museum and performance space because Robert Johnson recorded there one time way back when, almost 100 years ago. And he was super influential in the blues world. He became known as, his sort of mythology around him was that he sold his soul to the devil at the crossroads. There's a character in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou that's obviously based off of Robert Johnson. But the thing about Robert Johnson is you can go and you can look up his music. Again, it's all on Spotify now, thank God. And you can listen to it. Now, I remember listening to it one day, and a lot of it is doom, ga-doom, ga-doom, ga-doom. It's blues music, you know. And but I slipped into Dave Matthews for a second there. But anyway, you can listen to some of these songs, and what blew me away was there are some songs where I'm like, that's not a blues song. That's rock and roll. Like, it is a rock and roll riff in a blues song that was recorded in the 20s. Like, that's how far ahead Robert Johnson was. He was recording rock and roll music in the 20s. You can definitely hear it. And that's why I like listening to this kind of stuff. It's like you get where the influences of the music that we all love and listen to today came from. Robert Johnson was a similar thing. I don't think he just vanished, but he died very young. He was just sort of one of those fireworks, as Katy Perry would say. Wow, just referenced Katy Perry. But no, he kind of blew up really, made a big impact, and then just kind of went away and vanished. And those kinds of stories are fascinating to me. The stories of people who were just ahead of their time, never really got the attention they deserved, and then years later, people rediscover them, and they get to actually finally make their impact on the world that they were born to do. It would be nice if they got to experience that themselves, but I guess posthumously, at least they got it out there. But anyway, so I just wanted to share that. And check out Connie Converse. There's some videos on YouTube as well. Just no videos, but it's just like her recordings. And it's interesting. If you're into that kind of music at all, I think you'll really like it. It kind of got stuck in my head. But that's it for today. Just wanted to put that out there. Also, a good friend of mine named Chelsea, her mother actually just passed away. I found out like 10 minutes before I turned on my phone here. And anyway, hug your mom, hug your dad if they're still around. Hug anybody that you care about, because that's life and it sucks. But my heart goes out to her. If you guys have it in you to leave a nice comment for Chelsea, I will share that with her. I know you guys are really awesome, and you've always been good to me, so I want to extend that to her as well. She's having a really rough day. So anyway, love you guys, and thanks a lot for watching. There'll be another video tomorrow on the main channel, and my voice is getting really high, and I hope you guys are doing well. Have a good week. Bye.